I would like to introduce Pam Covault and Laura Mallett. Pam is the Director of Nursing of the Mary Grimes School of Nursing here at Neosho County Community College, and Laura is the Assistant Director. And they have attended a presentation and are going to share some of the insights that they learned related to reality-based leadership. So Pam and Laura, take it away.
Sounds great. As Marie said, Laura and I attended a presentation. The speaker was Cy Wakeman. Cy Wakeman is a highly sought after speaker on leadership and on resolving workplace drama. In fact, a lot of her research is in the area of workplace drama. And she has written 3 books, 2 of which are on the concept of reality-based leadership. And then the last book is called No Ego. And it talks about how leaders can cut the cost of workplace drama. So she's a very motivational type speaker. She also has a pretty extensive podcast library and a blog library, but I think, and I talked with Laura about this, and Laura said she thought I was right. I think you actually have to have been at one of our workshops to gain entry into those. But you can also see her on YouTube. We're going to show you a little blurb of her a little bit later, but you can just Google her and she'll come up in YouTube. She's done a couple TED Talks, very dynamic speaker. So I would highly recommend, if you have some time, just to go hear what she has to say. As I said, she talks about workplace drama. And what she defines as workplace drama is an emotional waste in the workplace. Waste that leads to disruptive behaviors and unproductive work patterns. And I'm sure as I say that, you guys can kind of identify some areas of emotional waste in the workplace that you've seen before. She identified in her research that the average person will be working in a workplace drama kind of atmosphere a minimum of 2.5 hours a day. And my slide just kind of takes you through how much work is lost, how much work time is lost from the week, month, and yearly perspective in just what she classifies as workplace drama. One of the things that I think is really interesting, how many of y'all have ever been plagued by, can I talk to you for just 1 second? And she says 1 second on the average is 45 minutes. So, and I know I personally have experienced that in my life. So I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. I imagine that you guys can say the same thing. She talks a lot about that 1 second and what that 1 second takes you through. And she does give us a few strategies for what to do in that particular situation. And we're hopeful today we're going to give you an overview. We're by no means going to touch everything. We actually heard, I think it was in excess of a 7-hour presentation. So obviously we're not going all those places today, but we'll kind of give you a little taste of what she had to say. In Cy's opinion, leadership styles that we have seen and heard about prior to this enable individuals instead of empower individuals. They focus on the leader changing the circumstances, not helping the individual work through the circumstances so that they can grow. And so that's why she focuses on reality-based, is getting them, the individuals you're working with, to work through their own problems, if that makes sense at all. I love this next slide because she says, where does the drama come from? You either hired it, you enabled it, or you are it. And I'm going to add, or you accepted it into your program. Because we all know that sometimes we have just 1 or 2 students. I know in the nursing classroom, 1 or 2 students in a group of 48 can make it drama central, because I think drama is a little bit contagious. So I definitely agree with her, and like I said, I would add, we admitted it into our program. She says the sources of drama are usually venting, gossiping, judging, tattling, and scorekeeping. And I tend to agree with that, that discussion. So the whole basis of reality-based leadership is you change the energy. When an individual comes to you and they're in that mode, then the role of the leadership is to change the energy of the discussion. And what she says we have to do is steer the individual from a venting perspective into a state of reflection. Because she says our brain isn't capable of doing both at the same time. So self-reflection is a drama diffuser. We need to empower the individual to think differently by steering them in that direction. One of the first concepts that Sai begins with is, what does great look like? She says really that all of us inspire to be great. We want people to think what we do is great, that we're doing a great job. And she also says, we know what great looks like. Every one of us knows what great looks like. But she also says that sometimes we use that knowledge to do evil. And when she uses it in that way, she says, we use the knowledge of what great looks like to judge others. We don't always wear what great is, but we use it to judge what other people around us are doing. She said, we have the ability to be great despite our circumstances. We may be in the very worst or in very complex circumstances, but we have the ability to take a different perspective and be great despite that. And I'm sure some of y'all can think of individuals who you would say, I definitely see that. I can see how they rise above the situation and continue to really make a difference. She says, oftentimes what is at the heart of our discontent is our problem with comparison of what others are doing and compared to what we're having to do, if you will. And so she encourages us to think about the fact that we are always going to see low performers. And we sometimes can't have any impact on what those individuals do, despite our many attempts to do so. But what we have to be concerned with is our performance and what great looks like to us. And so we be great despite what people around us are doing, if that makes sense. She talks a lot about the ego, and we're going to talk about that more. But that ego piece, according to Sai, is really that perspective, or what she would define it as is it's reality plus our story. So really the ego is how we define or interpret reality. Does that make sense? And I'm going to give you an example. She gives a couple examples, and one of them in particular I really resounds with me, because I have an unreasonable fear of snakes. And she gives the example of being on this great hike, and hiking up the mountain, and the air is fresh and clean and crisp, and you've really gone beyond what you thought you could do, and you're feeling great about yourself. And then just on the path in front of you, you see something kind of slither. And what most of us immediately do, and I know I would do, is yell snake and go into immediate panic mode. And what that does is veer us off of that euphoria or high that we had in our accomplishments to this point, because we have interpreted our reality as now that there is a snake on the path. She goes on to talk about, perhaps you now go a little further and get up a little bit of courage to further investigate, and you might find that that snake on the path was just a strap off of a saddlebag or a backpack or something like that. But the problem is, once you've gone into your drama of the snake, you can't ever get yourself back to that previous euphoria. So what you want to do is start to empower individuals to stop, take a step back, and really look at what is reality. Not what your story is or what you think reality is, but what is the reality of the situation. Another really great example that she gives is Well, I'm veering off the wrong path, aren't I, Laura?
Just a little.
Just a little, yeah. So I'm going to go back. So basically, she talks a lot about. Let's go back to great. Great is basically not worrying about what others are doing, but really thinking about, are you operating at your absolute best ability? I know in the nursing world, an example of that is nurses can focus on being upset with pharmacy about pharmacy didn't do so much that really they could have just taken care of the situation and not worried about what pharmacy did, or really insert any other ancillary, group into that equation. So really just focusing on what you're able to do. So now I kind of stepped on Laura's toes, but I'll let you take over.
Yeah, you didn't step on my toes. It's fine. So in her book, The No Ego, she says that your ego is not your amigo. And what she's meaning by this is, because we build our own story in situations, 32% of the time, it's all drama that we build into that. So, and we build it into our story. And she says that the ego likes to keep score and tattle and vent, kind of like a toddler. So an example of this is, you could be walking down the hall and walk past someone and they don't say hello to you. And then immediately you start in with your story, well, they must be mad at me, or I must have done something to them to offend them, or this is going on, or that's going on. What did I do to make them mad? And it's all, if you actually went to that person and asked them what the deal was, it's probably they were just thinking of something else, or they were sidetracked or on a project, or they may not even have seen you to begin with. But in that meantime, you've built up this whole thing of, they don't like me because they didn't say hello kind of issue. So the ego likes to exaggerate things and in the situation and make it even worse, so that you can't see the reality of the situation because of all the drama that you built up. Can you go to the next slide, Pam? Thanks. So what is the reality? So she gave these questions of what you do know for sure, and what is your part in this? So these are all questions you can ask yourself to define what the reality is and what your ego is. And once you start looking at the reality aspect of it, it kind of shuts the ego down, because like Pam said a minute ago, you can't be in both places at the same time. So if you start looking at what do you know for sure, and what part of this is yours, and what are your ideas for resolving this situation or issue, and what are you going to do to help, and what can you do next to add value to the situation? Are you using your own opinion to move things forward, or to stop the action? And a lot of us get into that mode where we form our own opinion of the situation, and then we really don't listen or take in the rest of it. What would you rather be right about the situation, or would you rather be happy? A lot of times the ego puts us into that position where it makes us feel insecure and not stable in the situation, or anxious or mad or upset, when we had the whole situation wrong to begin with. So commit to succeeding given the reality you face. This is the goal that we want to get everybody at. And this really also, it doesn't only apply to the people that we work with, but to our students also. And the goal is to get the individual to not argue with reality, but to commit to succeeding given the reality they face. So we want to get them out of that ego stage and start looking at the reality aspects of it. Back over to you, Pam.
Yep. And really, that set of questions is something that I like to keep kind of close at hand, because it's so easy when a person comes into you in that drama mode to kind of fall into that drama with them. And so just keeping those questions handy so you can redirect, again, it's really redirecting the energy by asking the questions, the right questions. Sai talks a lot about staying in your lane. She said that, you know, your lane is your business. You stay in your lane. You don't compare. And I think it's a challenge to keep individuals from comparing themselves with one another. But I think the reality is that when we approach workplace drama, it really is about what the individual is doing and getting them to concentrate on their business. They're not going to be able to influence behaviors of others, but they can choose to make the right call on their own accounts. So it's important to do that. One thing that Sai does say, when you argue with reality, you will lose every time, 100% of the time. So, you know, stay in your lane. She'll talk about staying in your lane. I mentioned briefly that the ego does use comparison to breed discontent. And a lot of times what we're looking at is, you know, how do I compare to the low performers versus the high performers? And you guys know as leaders that you're probably not going to hear a lot about, you know, I'm not working as well as the high performers. We tend not to do that kind of comparison. What we do comparison on is others are not working as hard as I am. So we're really comparing ourselves to the low performance or the low performers. And so her emphasis is on getting people to stop judging and evaluating instead. Someone is not acting the way you prefer. So let's look at what could be the causes of that and what we could do to intervene with that. She said, always talk with the individual, asking those questions to get them to that place of neutral. So you get to really, what is reality? And she says that neutrality is expansive because then it allows you to explore. When you get that individual to the point where they understand this is the reality of the situation, then it really opens up a new avenue for you to explore possible solutions to what you see the problem is. One of the things she talks quite a bit about is always ask for what you expect, what you want delivered. Be clear about your expectations. Sometimes I think that's hard to do when all of the drama is coming at you as a leader, but you need to be very, very clear about what you expect to happen as the outcome of a discussion, and then also empower the individual to achieve those expectations. One of the things she's very adamant about in several areas of her book is never be okay with noncompliance. Noncompliance either needs to make a choice to get on board or makes a choice to get out of the situation. Because, and you all have been in situations, I'm sure, where an individual who chooses to be non-compliant can really slow down progress in your department in a big way. You know, one of the examples that comes to mind to me is, you know, nursing just recently made a pretty significant change in our curriculum, and not only in how we're going to deliver nursing information, but really in the way we're delivering it. We're not doing the lecture as much now as we are do interactive student experiences, and they don't much care for that, but we know that's what's best for them, so we have to kind of go forward. If we had had individuals in our faculty who were resistant to that change, it would have just slowed our progress. And I'm not going to say we didn't have one or two that weren't, because there were one or two that just didn't really want to get on board with that change. And so that's those individuals that sometimes will slow down the discussion by trying to lead the discussion off course. And so you always want to think about that. Let me see. I think that's all I have to say on that part. One of the things that she also indicated is that everything is on a bell-shaped curve. We've been there, we know that. And so what that means is there's always going to be people on the high performance end of you and on the low performance end of you. So what she's saying here is that there are always going to be slackers. No matter what you do, you're going to always find someone who doesn't quite work according to your work ethic. So you have to accept that as reality and learn to focus again on what you can do. Stay in your lane. So as a leader, you try to guide this individual to focus on what they can control, not what is controlling them, but what they can control. And, you know, help them to get to the reality of the situation. So do what you are doing because that's important to you. One of the things that I've really tried to do with the nursing students is talk about what does a great nurse really look like? And if that's how I want to be defined, then what is the behavior that I need to be able to demonstrate to show that I really am as great as I can be? Focus on me and what I can change. So I alluded to just a little bit ago that one of the major forms, or what she says, one of the major forms of drama for a leader is what she calls the dumping syndrome. Now, us nurses, dumping syndrome is a whole different thing, but she calls it dumping syndrome. And what she means is that throw open the leader door, come in and dump the situation, fully expecting for the leader to just take the whole situation out of the hands and resolve the issue. And she said that really isn't very healthy for anybody. And I think you all probably as leaders agree with that. So, because really what individuals want when they are dumpers, so to speak, is they want you to fix it. They don't want to have any ownership in the problem or the resolution of the problem because they don't see it as their problem. So they want the leader to fix it. So again, her remedy for that is something that we in nursing actually do called SBAR. And it is something that we in nursing use to help organize our thoughts so that when we get ready to report to another nurse, or if we're going to call the physician, we've kind of got all our data collected in a logical order so that we're ready then to problem solve with that physician or with this other nurse. And I'm gonna let Laura take over and tell you a little bit about what SBAR looks like.
So SBAR was originally put together by a branch of the military, the Navy, and they use this in problem solving with the members of the military. So if I have a situation, I want to know what's happening and what the main problem is. So that's referred to as my situation. My background is what relevant information do I need to pull from the background information to be able to help with this situation and solving the problem. The assessment and analysis is what is the reality of the situation? What do you think is going on? What's important and what changes can be made? And then any of the recommendations. So my recommendations on how to solve that problem. So in nursing, what we do with the nursing students is they'll gather their information. So what do you know about that patient? What's the situation? What assessment information do you have? What analysis can you make from that information? And then what recommendations are going to help solve that problem? So, and you can, I've tried to do it with SBARing with the faculty. They know how to use it in nursing, but to not have that dumping syndrome where they come into your office and want you to solve the problem, or even with students, for them to dump a situation in your lap and walk away from it and not take ownership. This is trying to get them to look at how they can be great in that situation and be able to use the SBAR to solve the problem. And it may not solve the problem. It may just give them ideas on recommendations that could solve the problem. And then in talking with them, they actually can come up with better solutions when you ask them the appropriate questions and stuff. And also with nursing, if you have this information available, that 2 a.m. doctor call that you make, you're less likely to get backlash from, I would say. Reprimanded or backlash or any of that. So, it gives you more of a problem-solving ability to where it's not getting a lot of stuff dumped in your lap.
And I might add that she has a really interesting handout on SBAR. So if that's something that you all would like to see, we would definitely be willing to get copies to you if you'll just let us know. She actually has a great little, again, I think you have to be at one of her webinars or her speaking events to get access to it, but she has a toolkit that includes all of those very important questions. But she would actually advocate that when a person comes to you with a dramatic situation, that you actually give them a form and say, here's your SBAR form. Now let's sit down and let's work through this together. Because she said that's the best way to get folks to really focus on the reality of the situation. And you will have people that'll walk in and say, oh, I don't have time for that. You just have to be able to change the energy and say, well, we are going to make time for that. Let's talk about that together.
Yeah.
Laura and I thought that you might really appreciate the opportunity to see Cy, because she was a pretty dynamic speaker. And so this will be just a little bit repetitive, but we'd like for you to hear just a little bit from her perspective. And so can you see, you can see now, right? Okay, let's see how this works.
I'm Cy Wakeman, and I'm a thought leader in human resources. In this video, I want to show you 5 ways
You have to turn the volume up.
to update your leadership philosophy. Many people don't even realize that traditional leadership philosophy, the ones you've been taught, the ones you've been practicing, are not helping, they're actually hurting. They're fueling drama.
Marie, I'm at my top, so what do I do?
Well, I can hear her. She's just faint, so I was going to turn my own volume up a little bit. And if you are at your max, I think we're going to go with it.
Okay. I didn't think about that, sorry.
At work, and they're creating entitlement. I won't bore you with the details of my research, but I am calling on everyone to modernize their leadership philosophies and update their practices. So let's get into those 5 tips. So number 1, stop blaming your circumstances. Seriously, your circumstances aren't the reasons that you can't succeed, and they aren't the reasons that your team can't succeed. And yet, when people come to you to complain about what's not working, or to tattle on other teams that aren't doing their fair share, or to tell you something that is happening in their reality that is making it tough for them, if you're like most leaders, you jump up to go off and fix it. But when you do that, you leave your team believing that the reason they can't succeed is their circumstances, their reality. And their circumstances aren't the reasons they can't succeed, it's the reality in which they must succeed. You not only leave them believing that their circumstances are their excuse, but you rob them of their own development. So when people come to you, your job isn't to overmanage and go fix things. Your job is to lead. So stop managing and start leading. So here's what I want you to do instead. Here's the tip, the technique. When people come to you and you're tempted to go fix the situation, I want you to stop. Focus on growing the person in front of you. Coach the person in front of you. Develop them. So when people come to you and they're complaining about adverse circumstances or they're tattling on their teams, I want you to absolutely refocus them on themselves. Number 2, start managing energy, not people. Great leaders need to focus on managing the energy of the situation rather than the people in the room. In my research, I took a look at where energy is going in meetings, and I'm here to tell you that over 90% of the meetings that I observed, the energy was focused on why we couldn't, why we shouldn't have to, why the idea won't work, and leaders went along with it. They were problem solving how to get people's buy-in rather than how to deliver what the organization needed. So I want you to work in your meetings and your interactions with people to move the energy away from why we can't to how we could, to move it away from why we shouldn't have to into how we can deliver exquisitely. One way to do this is to make sure that you're using empathy, not sympathy. Now, here's the difference between the two. Sympathy is when I'm hearing that you're in pain and I go on to validate your victim mindset that the reason for your pain is the circumstances or other people, things outside yourself. Here's what I mean. You're in pain, I listen, and I start to sympathize. I start to agree with you and then collude with you and then leave you believing that the reason we're in this situation in the first place is somebody else's fault. Empathy is still kind acknowledgement of the fact that you're struggling right now, but it's followed by a call to greatness. I see that you're suffering, so let's talk about what we would need to do in order to mitigate the risks you're concerned about and move forward. See, when leaders roll things out, too often they're going out with sympathy. Here's what that looks like. You're rolling out a new change and you start by apologizing. I'm so sorry. I know you're all so busy. I hate to bring another thing onto your plate, but I've been instructed that this is a have to, it's mandatory. So if out of the goodness of your heart, you can just please get on board and do your best. You've just taught people that buying is optional. Here's what empathy looks like. I have some new information that we need to deliver on, and it's going to involve changing our business processes. So I'm going to let you know what I know, and then we're going to go around the table and we're going to focus on what we need to do to be able to make this change least disruptive to our customers. Here's the explanation. Now let's go. What's your idea? What's your idea? What's your idea? See, that technique takes the energy of the meeting away from why we shouldn't have to or why it's a dumb idea and puts it into, oh yeah, we're gonna, now let's focus on how we could. Number 3, understand that suffering is completely optional. And by the way, most often self-imposed. So let's break this down a bit. Suffering is completely optional. Your suffering and the suffering of your employees is not coming from your circumstances, from your reality. It actually comes from the story we make up about our reality. Your suffering is optional. There are 2 ways to go through the day, joy or misery, your choice. And here's what you need to do as a leader. Separate out suffering from reality. People come to me and they're frustrated. They're like, Sai, we're moving again. Now, I may think that the reason they're suffering is that we're moving, but that's not the case. The reason they're suffering is they haven't yet gotten mobile, even though we've moved many times. And if they want to get out of their suffering, instead of asking me to stop the moving, I need them to get mobile so moving doesn't hurt. See, are they suffering because we move, or are they suffering because they haven't yet gotten mobile? That's what I mean by separating out suffering from reality. If our reality is we move a lot, how can we make it so that we can be very fast in our moving and not have any pain around it? We grow in our own mobility. See, everywhere your team hurts is an indication of where they need to grow next. Number 4, work with the willing. I can't tell you the number of emails and calls I get where people want me to tell them how to get somebody who is resistant on board. And my advice to you folks is work with the willing. Buy-in isn't optional. And buy-in is a verb. It is something the employee needs to do. They need to go first. Buy-in is a verb. They need to get bought in. Too many times we're putting the responsibility on the leader to get somebody bought in, but their willingness is their business. I can only work with the willing. I've worked with a lot of people who actually thought there was a third option until I, as a leader, helped them see reality. So here's an idea for you as a leader. When you're working with somebody who is resistant, who's withholding buy-in, use questions for self-reflection. to help them understand their own magical thinking. I would love to have you on board. And if you can't get on board because the decision's already made and our job is to get on board, mitigate the risk, and execute flawlessly, then I need you to transition off my team, because one of my non-negotiables is that you gotta be willing, and buy-in is your verb, it's your job. And so leaders, work with the willing, and if you have resistors, use these questions asking them what's their plan to sign up or out, to help them understand there just isn't a third option. Number 5, get very suspicious of conventional leadership philosophies. I started my career out as a therapist, and when I was promoted to my first leadership position, I was shocked at what we were being taught in leadership development courses that ran counter to the evidence-based learning I had in psychology. I actually made my career in the beginning out of questioning conventional wisdoms that most people have just accepted to be gospel truths. Here's an example. I heard over and over again leaders agreeing with people that change is hard. But you know what? In my research, change is only hard for the unready. See, it isn't change that's hard. What makes it hard is whether you're ready or not. Let's say that you have 2 great employees, except for one has refused to upgrade to a smartphone. In fact, they have the same flip phone they've had since high school. And the other one continues to upgrade their technology as often as possible to make sure that they have use of all the tools and resources that a great smartphone can provide. Flip phone, smartphone. Now, the change comes. You give each of them a new smartphone. Is change equally hard for them? No. Change is only hard for the unready, for the flip phone guy. Here's what I mean by that. The one who has always been upgrading, they take the new smartphone and their attitude towards you is gratitude. They're so excited that they just for no reason get a new smartphone. They go to the cloud, get their stuff, they're ready to go in about 5 minutes. The guy who has the flip phone is curled up in the fetal position. You have to hold a whole change initiative and training class to get him up to date. But see, it isn't the change that was hard. It's just that change is hard for the unready. Now, there are so many simple things that you're saying on a daily basis, like change is hard, that I want you to stop and question. So I hope I have you intrigued or at least convinced that it's time to update your leadership philosophies. It's time to admit that our way of leading isn't working. And in fact, we still have a lot of drama and even more entitlement in our workplace than ever. If you love this video and you're ready to modernize your leadership philosophy, you're in luck. I have so much more content to share with you. To get started, make sure you check me out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and definitely subscribe to my channel. If you're looking for training and development tools for you and your team, go to my website and help yourself. And don't forget to share this video with all of your friends and colleagues so that they too can ditch the drama.
So she kind of summed up much more eloquently some of the things we've been talking about. We're going to just leave you with one last thought, and that is, in order for us to be able to change the energy, we kind of have to walk the walk. We have to watch, you know, how we create the drama. So be careful, you know, of what our responses are, what our nonverbal gestures are. You know, be sure that we're not silent when we should be speaking, or speaking when we should be silent. It can go either way. And then just be able to manage your own energy. And I will tell you that I think that takes practice. You have to kind of embrace it and really stop. And because most oftentimes I think we as individuals are reactive to drama. And so you really have to stop and evaluate and remember to ask yourself those questions and not buy into all of the drama around you. Let me see. I think that is all that we have. We did kind of in conclusion leave you with some questions. do you find that any of these principles actually apply to our work environment? Are there some of her ideas that you can employ, whether you're acting with coworkers or your classroom or athletes or what have you? And do these strategies apply to the way we interact with each other as professionals? And so I'll just leave you with those thoughts. I know in my own work role, I can give specific examples where we could embrace that way of thinking and literally, like she said, change the energy of what's going on. So Marie, I think we're ready for questions.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you both, Pam and Laura, for your presentation. I learned a lot. It was really interesting, and I appreciate that. We do not at this point have questions in the chat, so I would just open up to anybody. Please remember to unmute yourself if you would like to maybe discuss the questions that Pam has posed to us here at the end, or if you have a question for Pam or Laura on something that they shared during the presentation. So the floor is yours.
Well, ladies, I don't really have a question per se, but I really appreciate you guys presenting. I felt like a bobblehead because I was just agreeing so much with everything that you were saying. And so I would appreciate the SBAR documentation if you wouldn't mind emailing and sharing that.
Absolutely.
So, I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.